Hi everybody and welcome to a Heel Heat Top 10. My name is George Coles. This is my tag team partner, Jim Brunzell.
Gary Rhodes, everybody.
I make you humble.
I make you humble, Jim Brunzell. I make you humble.
It's me, Brian Blair.
Oh, I thought it was.
Anyway.
I thought it was Brunzell he hated.
Anyway.
Oh, sorry.
The topic for the top 10. I know, it takes a lot.
Oh, shit.
We'll hook the charger up to your ears in a second. The topic for the top 10 this week is for wrestlers that have held on too long. And I'll go ahead and let you start it off, Gary.
We're probably going to catch a lot of slack for our number 10 guy, but the guy did hang on a while too long in the wrestling business. Not the business per se, but as a wrestler.
Yeah.
And our number 10 is Handsome Harley Race.
And the main reason is if you guys seen him in AWA in the late 80s, he was a shell of the greatness that is Harley Race. And Harley Race is one of the top 5 greatest wrestlers of all time.
If not the greatest heel of all time, he's one of the greatest heels of all time. Yeah. I mean, this guy actually got stabbed, shot at, cut with glass.
He's a tough son of a bitch.
Exactly. This man, I mean, there's not much you can't say bad about Harley Race in this wrestling business.
But the AWA run was terrible.
Oh, the WWE run, or WWF run was terrible. That's King Harley. But
even
that was for respect.
Even with that wasn't as bad as he looked. In AWA, he was 40 pounds heavier than that, and he couldn't move, and he was wearing a purple singlet. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, to me, it hurt the mystique of Harley Race.
Yeah, so I always try to get that out of my head. The whole AWA run, the whole.
Well, that's the reason he's on this list.
Exactly.
The WWE run wasn't that bad.
Yeah. But if you look at the greatness he had in the NWA back when the NWA title was the main title, yeah. I mean, there was no title bigger. He was an 8-time NWA champion and well-deserving of so.
No, our next guy's a 2-time NWA champion. Number 9, sad to say, one of my idols, the hardcore legend, Terry Funk. I mean, the guy's, 70 and still wrestling?
A lot of people say he should have retired before he went and helped Paul Lee with the ECW run.
And he should have. I mean, he had no business.
But the matches he put on then were good, though. You can't.
But that's 17 years ago, yeah. And he's still going. I mean.
But I'm saying if he would have went to '98, some of the matches he had. I mean, even working for Vince after that with the whole Chainsaw Charlie gimmick.
It was great. But it's just I feel bad because. You know how much pain he is, especially if you watch Beyond the Mat or Behind the Mat. What the hell was
Beyond the Mat.
Beyond the Mat. Where he can't even walk, and that's 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And he still wrestled.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main reason he's on here is because for his health, I'd like to see Funk hang up the boots for good. I mean, he's retired 15 times already.
Right. Well, our number 8 guy hasn't retired yet. He is in the TNA Hall of Fame. He was their first induction. Sting. His match qualities have really dwindled down to...
Especially in the last 2-3 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he has to be in a ring with a guy that can carry him. He don't even wear the wrestling tights anymore. He puts a shirt on.
He has a tights. He just has a shirt on.
He just wears a shirt over top, which... You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, Sting was a jacked up dude. And
back in the day, Sting was as good as anybody in the business.
He was the Ultimate Warrior, but better. You know, yeah. I always thought he was a better wrestler than the Warrior.
He was what would happen if you gave the Ultimate Warrior gimmick to Bret Hart, it would be Sting.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, he's just a shell of himself, and his last 3 years have been particularly bad.
Now he's reformed the Main Event Mafia, which still he surrounds himself with the younger wrestlers, but he just needs to hang the boots up. Be a manager or something, Sting.
There you go.
Be a man about this. Well, I mean, right now everybody's wanting him to leave there and come to WWE and wrestle the Taker.
Yeah.
And
I'd rather see him wrestle guys like Punk or Orton or younger guys.
I think they
would. Punk or young.
Yeah, but I think they'd blow him up.
There you go. Speaking of a guy that blown up, and that's our number 7 guy, Vern Gagne, who wrestled well into the 80s. About 10 years past his prime, if not more. I can remember he wrestled the last last I can really remember was '87. He wrestled with his son against it.
87, 88, something in that area.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But it was a good 10 solid years past his last solid run. He just kept bringing himself back and making himself a champion.
You know, when you own a company, it's easy to do that, but I just think Vern, like we were talking about, people being a shell of their former selves, Vern was. I mean, Vern
Could barely walk.
Well, in Vern's prime, he was bigger than anybody.
Yeah, he was
the pre Hulk Hogan. I mean, he was on national television
before anybody else.
Exactly, and he was their wrestling champion. He was on cereal boxes and all that good shit before 20, 30 years before Hogan was.
Yep.
Now our number 6 guy is one of the greatest wrestlers in Mexico, Mil Mascaras,
who is still wrestling.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, he's got to be in his 70s.
Yeah, he has to.
And that's the thing. If you guys remember the '97 Royal Rumble, he looked terrible in that as a surprise appearance, and he's still wrestling now. So that just tells you, anytime you look bad 15 years ago and you're still going, not a good look. I mean, he's a bona fide legend. There's no question about it. He created a style that a lot of people ran with and got very successful. Himself, he got very successful. He's probably the most successful Mexican wrestler in history. I mean, it's either him or El Santo, wouldn't you say?
Oh, of course. I think
El Santo's more the movies.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. The fact that he's wrestling now is ridiculous. And our number 5 guy is a guy that had serious injuries and came back and just, it wasn't him, and that's superstar Billy Graham.
More than just the serious injuries, I think he also had a lot of mental issues.
And drug issues.
Caused by the drugs. That he was a shell of, well, we keep saying that, but it's true though. He was a shell of a man he once was. When he was superstar Billy Graham, the WWF champion, he was the man.
Even when he was in AWA, he was impressive.
And then he went and shaved all his hair off and did that whole kung fu thing.
Which wasn't terrible.
It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't him.
The reason I'm thinking it is, remember...
Well, that's what I was getting to. Then he came back and did the announcing and stuff like that and tried to wrestle again.
Yeah, he came back. They had the inspirational story where he had a hip replaced. And it was just bad, superstar. I mean...
No, he's a guy that was way ahead of his time.
Oh, yeah.
The promos he's cut, the way he did it is a style 20 years ahead of its time. But the guy is just so filled with...
Really? Are you going to WWF DVD it?
Well, I like the DVD anyways. But his bitterness and anger has really caused me not to like the man.
I mean, he
was a fan, but just not... I don't know.
He was a template for Jesse Ventura and Hulk Hogan.
Oh, yeah. Scott Steiner.
Scott Steiner... Full sail, ripped the whole gimmick off, from everything down to the hair.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. As far as a performer, I think he was the best. But like I said, with the way he acted and just held on a little too long.
Scott Steiner's a better wrestler than Superstar.
Oh, I do too. I mean, he's a college wrestler too. He's just not a better. The thing that Superstar was 10 times better at though was the talking.
He's better than give me the fucking mic.
Well, he went to the University of Michigan, so he's not the greatest of talkers. But anyways.
WCW sucks. Scotty was the best on the mic.
Now, speaking of somebody on the mic, our number 4 is one of the color commentators for Raw.
Woo! Not that
Jerry Lawler. Jerry Lawler just had a heart attack a year or so ago.
And he's wrestling again.
He still wants to wrestle, still wrestles.
Please hang him up, Jerry.
For your own safety, hang him up. I got tired of seeing Jerry Lawler wrestle 10, 15 years ago. When his whole deal with Bret Hart was done, I was done seeing him wrestle. When they did the ECW thing and Taz just gets up and taps him out, and Taz is way out of shape. He shouldn't have been wrestling or anything like that. Just comes from behind and chokes him out with Taz mission. It just, really,
it is the Taz mission.
It is, but really,
it's the Kata Hajime.
This is one of the biggest wrestlers in Memphis wrestling history.
In wrestling history.
Yeah.
He's held more titles than anybody else.
But it just, for his own safety, it's not sitting there saying, hey, Jerry.
The thing of it is, between his commentating and the matches he's put on for the last, since 2000, we'll cut it off at 2000 because he still had good matches up till then. Since 2000, the matches and the commentating, there's a whole generation of people that don't know how great Jerry Lawler is. They see this version of Jerry Lawler, which is his commentating was excellent at one point, and now it's slipped. However, his wrestling, he's a shell, and again, he's nothing like he was at his heyday. In his heyday, he could be the most over face in the territory or the most hated heel with the flip of a switch, and the fans would go along either way.
Well, when he first went to work for Vince, he attacked Bret Hart at the King of the Ring, and right there just made him the most hated guy in wrestling. His talking ability then was on point. His commentating skills people could badmouth us for whatever it is, but even before the heart attack, we were talking about how bad Jerry Lawler was getting. Hearing the same jokes over and over again really isn't what I want to turn on the Raw for. I want to hear new shit. I love the addition of JBL, and I think JBL is saving him more, and helping him out more than Michael Cole has been. JBL gives him something to play off of, something fresh, and I do like the way things are going now. But as far as in the ring, please, Jerry, stop.
Speaking of has-beens, our number 3 guy is Dory Funk Jr.
Which is funny, is both Funk brothers are former NWA champions and the only brothers to ever be NWA champions.
The thing with Dory is, if you've seen the matches, and he still wrestles now.
Yeah.
That's another. A lot of these guys, Dory's what, 6-7 years older than Terry?
Dory has got to be in his mid-70s.
Well, he's 6 or 7 years older than Terry, right?
Something like that.
Dory, when they brought him in, Terry Funk was feuding with the Public Enemy in ECW, I think it was 94 or 95.
Oh, God, yeah.
And they brought in Dory to wrestle with Terry, and Dory wrestled Terry's style, which was the hardcore style against the Public Enemy, of course. And he just, that's 20 years ago, he was out of place and he couldn't keep up, and he was winded.
I could trump that. I can go back to when the Funks were in WWF years.
When he was Hoss Funk?
When he was Hoss Funk, and he wrestled like he was a zombie. Honestly, I don't think Dory Funk Sr. has known where he was since the late 70s.
You mean Junior?
Well, Dory Funk, whatever. He's old enough to be a senior.
I think their
dad's a senior.
There's a Dory Funk 4 now.
Yeah.
That's,
and not to badmouth him, but
do not get me wrong. Everybody that's on this list at one point was great. And they just hung on for way too long and let themselves become a joke. And to me, 60, 50, 70-year-old Dory Funk, bald, beer-bellied.
Does it hurt you to see that...
Not able to keep up with the fucking Public Enemy.
Well, does it hurt you...
I like the Public Enemy, but they're not workers.
But does it hurt you to have one of your favorite wrestlers, Terry Funk, to have him on this list? To see him, just the memories of those matches. And that's what we're getting to.
For both the Funks. Harley Race hurts me. Now, most of these guys on here, the reason they're on here is because it bothers me to see them now and see what they are, and they're not what they used to be. And
we're not trashing these guys. They've all been accomplished wrestlers, like you just said. Which brings us to our number 2 guy. One of the guys, his ego has kept him in this business for so many years, and he's killed careers. He made a career of killing careers. Hulk Hogan. This man, and he still wants to be a champion now, and he's in his 60s. He wants to beat Bully Ray for the championship to be a TNA champion.
Do you think his last good run was the run he had with Shawn Michaels?
Well, that was
just 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago, and I think Shawn kept him alive that whole match. And
the nostalgic run was what it was, but...
His last good run was the whole Rock Hogan.
The thing of it is, Vince knew when to cut ties with him. Vince let him go to TNA.
Yeah.
He was under a Legends contract for the next 20 years, and Vince let him go. That tells you something, that if Vince doesn't see money out of a guy... Hogan, we talked about it earlier. He's hurt the business a lot, but he probably has done more for the business than anybody else.
I just don't see a guy like Hulk Hogan be a color commentator. I don't see him being like where Lawler
A GM.
Or a GM or
Which
anything.
is, I mean, just hang them up, Hawkster. Plus, it's hard, like we've said with some of these guys, Lawler, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, talking about, and superstar Billy Graham, talking about some of the injuries that have taken toll on their career. It's hard seeing Hulk Hogan barely able to walk.
It is.
I mean, this is a guy that slammed Andre the Giant, that slammed King Kong Bundy, that took on Big John Studd. I mean, this is the guy, and now he's walking around like my grandpa.
Exactly. Now, before we get to number one, we're going to go to the best of the... Well, I hate to say the best of the rest, but the guys that didn't quite make the list. I'll go first. Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah, I mean, and he was more forced into wrestling.
Because he wanted to keep his son wrestling, and Vince Jr. said, I'll keep your son wrestling if you keep wrestling because you're making me money.
Yeah. So that's why he doesn't make the list, but he was terrible in the early to mid 80s.
Oh, yeah.
At that point, he had already wrestled 20 plus years. And,
more than that.
And it showed.
Yeah.
Our next guy is Hacksaw Jim Duggan. A guy who, again, is still wrestling now. You could probably go to a local indie show somewhere this year and see him.
Or wait for a Raw and have Santino wrestle him. Yeah. Another guy is one of my favorites, but he's one, he still wrestles indie shows, and he's one of the big I think he's one of the bookers for WWE still. Mm-hmm. Is Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we talk about.
No, with Dusty, I don't fault him as much. It's not like he needs the money. He's making money. He's just in it for the fun and loving the business. I would hate to see Dusty get hurt wrestling for a $300 night.
Well, the thing of it was, remember in '99 where he had his feud with Steve Corino in ECW, mm-hmm. and he looked bad then, and he continued to go on past that. I mean, that's the thing. Once you start looking horrible and you're not the guy you used to be, there's a difference between taking a step back and taking 15 steps back. And in our last of the best of the rest, I hate to do this, man. It's like
Did you skip him on purpose for me to do it, or what?
It's like taking Old Yeller out to the back and shooting him. My absolute favorite wrestler of all time, Mick Foley. The whole TNA run, it's an embarrassment to the career of one of the all-time greats. I mean, the joy that this man has given me is more than everybody on this list put together. I mean, he's my absolute favorite wrestler, and it bothered me so bad watching him in TNA because you could see all the injuries hurting him. You could see, I mean, even when he did the stuff with Orton, you could see where he wasn't him. In TNA, you started to see where he was cloudy-eyed, where, the head injuries are starting to take their toll, and he's brittle, and he's an old man.
And it's not like he needs the money. I mean, I know Mick is stacked up money. He's not a guy that spends money, so he's probably still got his first WCW paycheck.
And if anybody out there thinks that we made this list to rip people,
no.
I just put Mick Foley, my absolute favorite wrestler, on this list.
No.
I mean, it's not a rip. I love Mick Foley to death. Go back and watch our top 10 favorites. Mick Foley is my number one.
Yeah, it's that we're not trying to badmouth any of these guys. It's just, I mean, I said with Lawler, I like Lawler, but I don't want to see him have another freaking heart attack.
We like all these guys on this list.
Hogan. I mean, we might trash him on our TNA shows, but I grew up idolizing the guy.
You did.
I said I did. I mean,
I was never a Hulkamaniac, but still, I respect what he did. And the number one guy is a guy that deserves more respect than anybody else in the history of wrestling. But he's not treated himself with that same respect. And that's the Nature Boy Ric Flair.
well,
There's a reason that at WrestleMania 25, Vince said, that's it. I don't want to see you wrestle anymore.
well, a lot of his problem was he'd make $10,000 a night and spend $100,000.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was his spending problems.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where he's on Celebrity Wife Swap. He had a great match with Jay Lethal a few years ago. I'm not going to knock him for that. But Ric Flair with the saggy boobs, the bald spot, a 70-year-old man bleeding all over the place. Or he's not 70, he's 60, isn't he?
He's in his 60s.
Well, he's not that much
He's older
older
than
Hogan.
He's like 4 years older than Hogan.
But it just, again, it hurts me to see possibly the greatest wrestler of all time coming out as a nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, even when he was losing to guys like Rico, that bothered me so bad.
Well, in the match he had with Shawn Michaels, he knew when to hang his boots up, and he to this day says he's done wrestling. I mean, unless it's something huge, he will not wrestle ever again.
Austin knows. I mean, Austin can go now. His neck is better. But he's never... I mean, there's some guys that have got out at the right time, and then there's some guys, like the guys on this list, that just stayed on too long. Hell, a guy we give a lot of shit to, Lex Luger, got out at the right time.
He did.
I mean, he got out before he became
Goldberg.
a shell of himself.
Goldberg, which wasn't really in business long, but he got out when it was time. You look at guys that got out of this business beforehand that just couldn't keep in, like Bret Hart. If it wasn't for the stroke and all that stuff, he'd probably be on this list.
Yeah, but basically that's our list. If you think we put someone up too high, put someone down too low, left someone off the list altogether, let us know what you think. Hit us up on our Facebook, our Twitter. Put it down where?
Down there.
Right down in the comments. Basically, that's all I got to say about this top 10. Anything you want to add?
Like I said, well, it's one more time. We're not downgrading or bad-mouthing any of these guys. It's just...
It is what it is.
Exactly. I'm Gary Rhodes.
And I'm George Coles, and this has been a Heel Heat Top 10.